mangy dogs, swab the decks and hoist the sails. The guns on board be needing some proper manning. Pieces of 8 and a fine wench on your arm, if your work be not too shoddy. Careful not to flounder too badly, though, or you may have to dance the hempen jig as we see you to Davy Jones. Chappie, my boy, on with the show.
Welcome, everybody, friends, folks, foes, and fellow pirate mateys, to this week's latest edition of Pirate Radio Podcasts, episode number 174. I'm myself, your host, as always, the Robin Hood's Chief Communications Officer, Jaffe Ryder. We've got yet another great guest for you again this week, joining us live out of London, UK, I believe is where he currently resides. We'll get to that in just a second for clarification's sake, but renowned mentalist Jonathan Royle is who is going to be joining us here, and so you can bet we're going to be getting a lot into discussing the world of magic, his history and early career working as a circus performer, and as well as something that just came up for me in researching Jonathan and his story. I only had half of the picture, actually, as we will clarify here within the next few minutes as far as what the deal was. But there's been some real upheaval and high profile. Well, he's been picking up a lot of exposure as of late, and it's actually in a good way too. So it's helping to bring about justice, I suppose, really, to a state of affairs which was really, from all accounts and indications, quite terribly out of sorts, as I believe the English would say. So right before we get to Jonathan, though, who is patiently waiting, 4 a.m. now in the UK, that just to remind people, WPRPN.com, that's the website you'll want to drop by, check out what links are available. Sign up is free, of course, and be sure to follow everything that we have available here in the drop-down menu off of either YouTube, Facebook, or DLIVE. And be sure as well to pirate1radio@protonmail.com is our email address, way of contacting us if you have any guest ideas or shows, for that matter, in mind. So, having said that, it is, of course, our first week of March. Jonathan kicking things off with us here. We had some website issues just over the past few days, thankfully managing to get those resolved. So we're going to do our best to have the March 2020 calendar up and available for people as soon as possible. In the meantime, though, yeah, I think, Jonathan, you have been patient enough now. You're slightly coffeeed up, so hopefully not too terribly groggy. But hey, thanks for going that extra mile. I know we did extend the option to you to do a pre-recorded affair, but I guess you more prefer the actual live engagement from the people out there joining us in real live time.
Yeah, where possibly. It's more real, isn't it? You know?
Sure.
Yeah. Don't want to get all new agey, but it's got a better vibe about it.
Well, we all come together as one big mind is kind of the way I look at it. And not really a hive mind so much as, yes, there's commonalities and common denominators and overlap. But when we meet in this virtual format, that there is a certain, yes, energy and vibration to things. And, we like to do whatever we can to make people feel as comfortable as possible while having as much fun as we can along the way, of course. So, you've really got quite a story. You've got a handful of websites, of course, and I'm not sure how many books you have now to your credit with respect to the world of mentalism, of course, various techniques and so forth. You're still busy, presumably performing on a routine basis. But before we really kind of get too far along the way and into things, I'm really curious to, unless there's anything else you'd like to mention first, but learn a little bit more about your circus origins, really. To me, that's quite fascinating. What can you tell us about that exactly?
Well, I mean, it all interrelates ultimately. Such is the wonderful, strange path of life sometimes. I was born, for people who don't know, and I mean, there's probably images on the slideshow, or if not, there certainly is wonderful embarrassing images on the resume page of my website, magicalguru.com, showing me when I was a little clown on the circus. But I was born on the circus mainly because my dad, obviously, and mum were travelling with the circus at the time. My dad was a circus clown and also did a kind of yogi act, like Indian fakir type act, although he's not Indian, but that type of act, bed of nails, ladder of daggers, dancing on broken glass, fire eating, all those weird, funky type of things. And then my mum did a sharp shooting, whip cracking, Western cowgirl type act. So I was born they were travelling with the circus, and such is the tradition of circus. At the first opportunity, I was pulled into the act, so to speak. So at 3.5, I was Britain's youngest professional paid circus clown under the name Flap the Clown, because my dad worked under the name Tizzy the Clown, and there's that saying that, when you get panicked or, you get in a tizzy. Well, hence it was Tizzy the Clown. And also you can get, when you're panicky, in a flap. So I became Flap the Clown, and together we were Tizzy and Flap. So I was doing these slapstick comedy routines on the circus with my dad from this early age. And to me, that was normality. And that's kind of a key word there, and key phrase. For me, that was normality, because to me, that was my environment. And that's very relevant to each and every one of us on this planet. We are products of our environment. What seems strange to one person can seem completely normal to somebody else, and vice versa. Although some people manipulate that, as I'm sure we'll come to later on, to their own advantage to control people. But the circus thing, what I learned at a very early age was that when you go to the circus, you can look and you see these most amazing feats, people apparently risking their life, and then other stuff that look impressive but not particularly dangerous. And the bizarre thing is, quite often, when you know the tricks of the trade and you've seen it from behind the curtain, quite often the stuff that looks relatively safe is actually the stuff that could kill you. And the stuff that looks really, really, really dangerous is actually the stuff that's relatively safe. It's the reality of it behind the scenes is kind of inverted. It's upside down. It's opposite to what you'd think it'd be. And I became aware of that because I was working in that environment. And later in life, and by later I mean teenage years, I realised that pretty much everything in the world is like that. The wrong way round, so to speak, which becomes clearer as we segue into things later on. So yeah, the circus, that's how I was born, that's what I started off doing. My mum wanted us to settle down rather than travelling around from town to town. She wanted me to go to a normal school, which ultimately I did. sort of properly from about the age of 6 and a bit. And then it became that I was only performing at weekends, school holidays, and this, that, the other. But that's when I very quickly found out the cruel, harsh reality of the world, that if somebody or something appears different or out of the ordinary to the mass populace, it's the natural instinct of the way society is programmed and the way the powers that be manipulate it to attack that out of probably more than anything from a sense of fear of the unknown. So, suddenly this circus clown, young circus clown who was travelling around, starts going to a normal school and is kind of the odd one out when he's appearing in the national newspapers and whatnot. And I found at that first school that I was actually getting bullied by the teachers.
So hang on, Jonathan, who actually, and this business of your name, I almost referred to as Alex. I don't know if we've made that clear to this point. I think we touched on it just briefly before going live here, but you were not famous on a national stage as a child, were you? I mean,
well, yeah. I mean, not perhaps to the same degree, but I mean, the fact that I was Britain's youngest paid circus clown did get talked about in national newspapers. As people can see on magicalguru.com on my resume page, several of the big national daily newspapers in England, it wasn't just when I was 3 or 4 that they covered it. When I was 6, they were using headlines like "Alex, the Circus 6 hit." So yeah, I mean, I was getting media attention. I'm sorry, right from the start.
Gotcha, sure. Hey, Alex, the circus. I'm sorry. What hit? 6?
Circus 6 hit. Because I was 6 years old at the time, so newspapers like to play on it.
6 hit, HIT.
Yeah.
So maybe, I don't know if that's a British expression or not, but yeah, sometimes because what I'm, Canadian English, and I grew up on the west coast of Canada too, so yeah, it's tough. I'm not sure if that's just one of those little.
I think it's just because it visually looked good as a headline. It doesn't sound it, but visually it did in print.
At first, I thought you said sex something, and I was like, "What?" It was like, it's like
no, that was much later years.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, yeah, and then that, yes, indeed. So, okay, and what else did you do then? What sort of capacities were you active in? What sort of roles did you take on throughout your years in the circus? How long did that last?
Well, involvement with the circus on and off still kind of lasted into late teens on a very loose basis. And the reason I say loose basis is because, the first normal school, the teachers bullied me. It got so bad because they were jealous that I was earning money and getting media attention. It got that bad that I did ask to go to another school, and I ended up going to another school, which was great. The teachers were absolutely fantastic, but there I got bullied by the kids for being the odd one out, being a clown, being the son of the circus clown, and I ended up growing to rapidly resent my dad in particular, because he was the circus clown, based on the child logic that if I was getting bullied for being the son of a circus clown and being a clown, and it was my dad that, at the age of 3 and a bit, I didn't really know what I was doing. It seemed like a game to start off with. It's only as you grow up you realise that you're actually performing and getting paid for it. So I blamed him ultimately, because I figured it was all his fault. If I hadn't have ended up doing it, then I wouldn't have been getting bullied. So I started to, in my mind, rebel. The trouble is, by this point, I'm sort of like 7 or 8, probably nearer to 8. 8, 9-ish, say. But by then, I suppose you could argue that I had become addicted to that feeling of performing in front of a live audience, the sound of the laughter, the sound of the applause. A lot of performers say that's the best drug on the planet, hearing the audience applaud. So on the one hand, I didn't want to do the clowning anymore, but on the other hand, I wanted the praise, the adulation, that feel-good factor of performing. So my hobby had been from a very, very early age. I was drawn to it. There was he's no longer with us, but there was a very famous British magician, magical performer called Paul Daniels. And when I was 4, which would have been 1979, he was just starting to get really well known on British TV. His career was just taking off. And in Blackpool, they had Blackpool being a big seaside resort here in England, they had at the time on the Golden Mile in Blackpool a thing called the Paul Daniels Magic Museum, where, because he was famous on TV, the idea was people paid a nominal amount to get in. There was equipment he'd used on TV, pictures of him with celebrities, It doesn't sound particularly exciting, but for people at the time in that era, in sort of 1979, 1980, these days we've got social media and your celebrities share stuff on Instagram and stuff. Back then, your equivalent of that was going and being able to see pictures and videos and stuff that they themselves were publicly putting on display. So that's kind of, what I'd related to. And at the end of it, they sold his magic sets and kits and stuff. Now, at the age of 4 and a bit, for a couple of months, we took a break from travelling with the circus, and we were actually employed by the Paul Daniels Magic Exhibition Museum thing on the Golden Mile in Blackpool to get an edge, as they call it, in street performing, to attract the public, to get them to stop on the street and then hopefully come through the doors and buy a ticket. And we were performing this, what they call a neck guillotine illusion, where it looks as though you take a sharp blade and make it penetrate through somebody's neck to get the crowd to stop, and then they go in and pay the money and at the end of it probably buy a magic kit or whatnot, which is exactly what I did. Any money I was earning was getting spent on buying the magic tricks and stuff and learning them. So I was performing as the clown, but I was already learning conjuring magic. So as I say, about 8 or 9, I rebelled, refused to perform as a clown the vast majority of the time, but started performing as a magician. So I was then getting paid shows doing that, magic tricks, illusions. By the time I was sort of 12, I had big illusions, cutting people in half, the kind of stuff you see David Copperfield do on TV. It took literally, big, massive transit vans to travel this stuff around. It was but frankly, excuse the language, it was a ball ache having to set everything up. So along the way, learning magic, I learned about the psychology of misdirection, how magic's about making people think they're seeing one thing happen, but in actual fact something else is happening. How there's also elements where, classic misdirection, where you perform things and also your verbal words and also your body language steer things that people believe they've got to look in one direction, for example, but at the moment you do the secret sleight of hand, your words or your body language misdirect them so they look away of their own accord, thinking it's completely natural, and it makes it easier for you to do the secret move or whatever. So, because there's a lot of psychology in magic, a lot of deception, but for positive effect. But I didn't want to carry all that stuff around, so I got drawn more into looking at things that wouldn't require carrying as much stuff around. And there's an area called Mentalism, which that's what they call it in magic, but in layman's terms, I suppose that's like mind reading. So-called psychic style entertainment, not claiming to genuinely be psychic, but apparently reading people's minds and all that kind of stuff, where you don't really need much in the way of props or physical items. So there's not tons of stuff to carry around. So I started segueing into that in my teenage years, and that heavily relies on psychology, the way people think, their natural motives in life, their natural triggers that will make them happy, sad, playing with people's emotions, climbing inside their minds. And through studying all this, that led me into hypnosis, and then we get to the point where the next chapter begins, so to speak. At the age of 14, yes, I did say 14, at the age of 14 I lied about my age and did a correspondence home study course in clinical hypnotherapy. And I passed the exam. And after I passed the exam, I came clean and told them how old I really was. And after they'd stopped being angry at being lied at, they accepted the fact that I did pass the exam. There was no taking that away from me. So I became the youngest ever member of that particular clinical hypnotherapy society, and started treating people, helping them, overcome fears, habits, addictions, phobias, and all manner of stuff from the age of 14. And then I love doing that, and I still do to this day, but I wanted to perform. We're back to that again. I wanted to perform. So that is why I ended up getting into doing the stage hypnosis side of things, because I found I was particularly good at hypnosis with the therapy and stuff, but that doesn't get you a round of applause at the end of it. So I started doing the, stereotypical cluck like a chicken, bark like a dog. When you wake up and hear this piece of music, you will be the world's greatest living reincarnation of Elvis Presley or whoever. All the daft funny stuff. And that weird roller coaster then led me to starting to manipulate the media, I suppose you'd call it, which was to get publicity to sell more tickets to shows and raise my profile. But through doing this rather successfully and getting on back in the very early 90s, literally hundreds of television and radio shows around the world, I had my own television special on German TV back in 1994. A bit later into the middle 90s, towards the end of the 90s, I filmed a European television series that everyone can watch for free on my website now anyway. It was of its era. It's very much outdated now, but, I don't say these things to brag. I'm just giving you an insight into the weird view on the world that I got from behind the scenes. And I very rapidly discovered that the media, there are a few exceptions to this, I will concede. Most of those are in the alternative media these days, but in terms of the mainstream media, the massive majority is complete and utter cobblers, excuse the language. There is next to no truth in entertainment journalism, and in terms of news journalism, at best, you get a tiny grain of truth that is blown out of all proportion, either positively or negatively, depending on the agenda that they want to promote. Because ultimately, the media is all about making money for the people who are involved and manipulation and control for the people who are the media moguls' true paymasters, shall we say. Because from behind the scenes, getting involved in the whole celebrity culture and stuff, seeing the dark side of show business, as it were, people, no doubt listening, will have noticed, if they, or will notice if they pay attention, that if they go to a normal, say, public venue and see a singer or a band or a comedian that's not famous, some of them are absolutely amazing. And you can think, well, why don't they end up on TV? And then there can be people who are on television who, conversely, are held up as being, you should go and see this person, who are actually pretty crap compared to some of the live performers who are out there in the real world. And you have to ask yourself, why is that? And the sad truth is, certain people in show business, more so in the film industry, but television presenters definitely, people in key positions, the pop industry, are guided into those positions or catapulted from behind the scenes, not just to make money, but because they can be easily controlled and manipulated to help carry on portraying a certain narrative, story, or perceived reality that's fabricated to the mass populace, the general public, so that they will agree to sing the song they've been told to sing, where the lyrics all seem very innocent, upbeat and pop music-y, but when you actually break them down, there's hidden subliminal phrases in there to instill fear and confusion into society.
Let me just
all of these things segue together, and in most recent, very most recent things, last year, after being alive, I turned 44 in August last year. Finally, my documentary, Extreme Danger, Extreme Hypnosis, subtitled "It's Time for the Sleepwalking Zombies to Wake Up," was released by Brick and the Roll Media here in England, and that's available on Amazon on demand, Vimeo on demand. All the details are on magicalguru.com, where it says Extreme Danger, Extreme Hypnosis, and also a massive encyclopedic book to go with that and expand on the subjects of how the governments and the media work hand in hand to manipulate, brainwash and control the majority of the public. And stuff is all kind of exposed in those things, along with what you touched on earlier, JF, of the fact that along the way I tried to expose the British journalist, the now disgraced and imprisoned for his dishonesty, fake sheikh, so-called fake sheikh Mazza Mahmood of the now shut down News of the World newspaper that used to apparently expose celebrities for misdoings, things they were allegedly done that were illegal. And the truth is, as it has now been proven by his own jailing, that these things were fabricated. People were framed and things were made to look as though they'd done things they hadn't done, and made to look as though they'd said things they hadn't said.
Yes, absolutely. And John Sweeney, who
yes,
he's quite a colorful character. I've followed his career, to put it mildly. You think you're widely known, I guess, as the bad boy of British magic. And I'd like to get into that a little more here before we kind of transition into the fake shake business, because I think the two, it's no wonder that you were targeted, frankly, it just makes sense, doesn't it? It's like, oh, let's set this guy up, and they did it to, I don't know, quite a few celebrities, this fake shake character working in conjunction with Rupert Murdoch. And the question to me is, where was he getting his marching orders from? Was it completely on his own initiative, or was somebody maybe, was sending him out to on these jobs to do exactly what came about? We'll get into that more, though. Just I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves here. Just maybe teasing the audience with a little bit of this information, which I myself only came across just yesterday, as a matter of fact. I was once again mostly, I guess you could say, interested in the Extreme Danger, Extreme Hypnosis video documentary, which you've put together. And but before even we get into that, the bad boy image, character, reputation, and so forth, that part of it may very well come naturally to you, and part of it is done for performance and entertainment reasons. Obviously,
Yeah,
you got to play it up. So, but how did that all come about then exactly? And it did lead you. You got into some hot water there, which, with respect to this fake shake scandal, I think led to you being really there. You were criminally charged for the course of, I think, 18 years almost, and now those charges have been now rescinded or.
Well, no, we're getting close to that, hopefully. No, I mean, as on magicalguru.com, there is a button on there that says fake shake even, which gives details or the direct link to the blog about the fake shake and my attempts to expose Rupert Murdoch's dishonest media empire. It wasn't just the fake shake. It's other people like Rebecca Brooks, who, wherever you are in the world, if you search her name, you'll see she was accused of being aware of phone hacking at the newspapers, which she'd been on trial for in a court and found to be innocent of, I have to say, to cover everyone legally. But more and more evidence is coming out in recent weeks that suggests strongly that she most definitely did know and authorise phone hacking, allegedly. So it's an entire industry, certainly with Murdoch, of corruption, lies and deceit.
Tabloid journalism at its finest in the UK. How about Max Clifford? I recently, I was doing some research actually into what's been taking place. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Operation Or. That it was like a dragnet, basically a pedophile type dragnet. I think they caught at the time years ago Pete Townsend, and of course Gary Glitter he's been on the run. Actually, he's in jail now. I think, isn't he, somewhere in Asia, if I'm not mistaken? But anyways, Max Clifford, it came out. Did you follow that whole episode?
Well, Max is an interesting one. He's no longer with us, allegedly.
He passed away in jail.
Yeah, well, allegedly. I only say allegedly because, well, it depends really how well he had hidden his files on everyone that he worked with over the years. If he had them hidden well enough, then he's probably alive secretly on an island. If they managed to find them, then no doubt he did die.
Have you been following the whole Jeffrey Epstein debacle?
Oh, too right. It's very much. I mean, when you've got someone who's connected to the daughter of a Mossad agent, as Ghislaine Maxwell, the daughter of Robert Maxwell, the late media mogul guy.
Correct.
Now, there's no genuine hard proof that he was a Mossad agent, but it is a little unusual for somebody to pass away and be given a full Mossad honours style funeral if you're not a Mossad agent.
And the way he supposedly died, just mysteriously, supposedly falling off the back of his yacht or something along those lines, slipping and...
Yeah,
isn't that the story? So
it doesn't seem right. Generally, isn't.
Dodgy.
There's always weird things happen with people in the media, and as I explain on CircusOfTheMind.net, it's because the kind of the middle board to manipulate the public. And if they do what the powers that be, I'm going to use that cliched phrase just for now, the powers that be, the true people behind the curtain, the real money people, the people at the top of the tree, not your governments. The governments, generally speaking, and politicians do what people hidden, your shadow underground figures tell them to do. They're just there to play out this narrative to the public, to manipulate and control them, to get the public into a state of disorientation and confusion and fear, where then the people at the top can do what they want, how they want, when they want. And people like the late Max Clifford, who represented celebrities, he openly in interviews would admit that although he got people publicity with fabricated stories and stuff, one of his biggest jobs was keeping negative stories about his clients out of the media.
No, that's right. Absolutely. That's what they're largely paid for, correct? Clifford?
And yeah, and I know firsthand. I worked briefly as an undercover journalist on a freelance basis, and it was seeing what went on behind the scenes that kind of motivated me to want to expose the likes of the fake sheikh and his illegal and dishonest techniques and all the kind of stuff that I do explain on that circusofthemind.net blog page. Because I found out during the course of my bit of work as a freelance journalist, it's covered briefly in the documentary, but more so in the book that goes with it, that the Australian-born entertainer, Rolf Harris, the artist and singer, who now lives in England.
Timey kangaroo down sport.
Yeah, I mean, who the hell would want to tie kangaroo down? You know? It's meant to bounce around, isn't it? You know, it's not right. But he served jail time for having been found guilty of allegations involving underage girls.
Right. Yes. Repeated incidents. Jimmy Savile too, the worst of the worst. But
the thing is, the media knew about these.
Right.
Certainly, right. Rolf Harris, for example, the media definitely knew about in the mid-90s. I know because I was passed evidence and proof that I took to certain media for them to break the story. And rather than break the story, they took that evidence, they bought it, giving the impression that it would be released, and instead they put it under lock and key in a safe.
Well, look at Hollywood mogul Harvey Epstein. Same deal. They knew so much of Hollywood knew. All the little sort of cute jokes that were made that you going back and looking through the archives, you can see the innuendo there.
Dirty secret in any level of power. Media is power because the people behind the scenes know they're manipulating and controlling. The film industry, yes, politics, it happens in as well. That's why you hear of scandals in these things. And often you only hear the scandals when the people aren't towing the line of what the powers that be behind the scenes want them to do. As long as they keep towing the line and doing what the powers that be want behind the scenes to keep the narrative going to the mass populace, then quite often, things are fudged, manipulated, covered up, purposely to protect that person. And you look at the likes of Jimmy Savile, the British TV presenter, now no longer with us, but proven to be arguably the biggest that we know of serial paedophile in history.
Yeah.
Arguably.
And he was also, and look how tight he was with British royalty, who themselves don't really seem to be having the best time of things currently. Sean Atwood, I don't know if you follow him or not, but he's been doing a lot of great work in that area. And the Yorkshire Ripper, Peter
it was mates with him.
Yeah, I mean he was tight with, he was pretty chummy with him, and it's like, geez, like you get, choose your friends carefully, people. Come on,
People knew. Yeah. They knew in the media. There's no two ways about it, and it was covered up because the fact is the media will keep things silenced if the powers that be behind the scenes tell them to.
Exactly.
It's as simple as that.
Jonathan, have you you maybe cover this in your documentary, and just to remind people as well too before we carry along any further here, we are speaking this week with British bad boy of hypnosis, Jonathan Royle, aka Alex William Smith, join us live via London. Along with his knowledge of both magic and the circus, we are keen on learning more about his latest documentary project, Extreme Danger, Extreme Hypnosis. Doesn't it seem, maybe I'm missing something here, but my sense for the longest time has been that the people who do the best typically in politics, or who find themselves operating at the highest levels, usually there's some sort of there's blackmail on all of them, frankly, in some form or fashion. really.
Of course there is. You know, there are the odd few exceptions now and again.
Right.
And there's a lot of people get into politics, don't get me wrong, who have the best of intentions. But generally speaking, either A, they're going to end up corrupted and compromised, or as Germans call it, compromat will be got on them. So they'll be brought in a situation where, I hate using that phrase, the powers that be, but the people at the top of the tree want to be able to control them, get them into position of power so that then they can get what they want brought in as laws and all this, that, the other. So they will find out what that person's weaknesses is. Is it alcohol? Is it drugs? Is it young boys or young girls? Is it ladies or men of a certain age or look? Whatever it may be, they will engineer situations to occur, and in places that have already been rigged up with, you know, video recording equipment and whatnot. And they will get evidence of them doing these things that would not look good to their public reputation, given what they're apparently supposed to be doing and standing for, so that they can literally go, if you don't want this getting out, maybe mention this possible motion to be passed in Parliament or Congress. And it is used to manipulate and control, compromise, and it's something that always has been. I mean, it depends. You look, and if you do real research into history and not his story, which is what history is, almost like two words, his story. They say the winner of a war writes the narrative. Well, that may be true, but it doesn't mean that the narrative they write is factually correct. And if you dig deep, you see that both world wars that there have been, and lots of other conflicts as well, but certainly both world wars, both sides of the war were ultimately funded by the same banking families and people. They profited from both sides.
Right. Oh no, yeah, the Hitler's Banking with Hitler actually is a really well-known documentary people hopefully can still find online. It's all about the operations that took place out of Switzerland, the conjunction with it's New York's with Wall Street and the Bank of London in particular. So
ultimately with the Rothschilds.
Sure, of course. Dynasty. I mean, well, State of Israel. Hello. I mean, that's their pet project, isn't it? So, but anyways, and which reminds me, you yourself, I'm guessing you've met him a time or two, but you're actually David Icke is who I'm talking about now here. But his son, you're actually you're friends with his son, correct? Who's a well-known musician, who's somebody of this, and I got to give a few shout outs here. One to Melissa Martell. We didn't do that earlier, unfortunately. Jonathan appeared on her show a couple of months ago, actually. So
indeed,
yeah, and
Melissa.
Yeah, the Open Door, Secret Door podcast. I keep wanting to say Open Door. I suppose some secret doors are open to some of us and others not. So go with the flow, folks. But so young Mr. Icke is an accomplished musician, somebody who the Illuminati approached, according, I think, to what I recall you saying, the movers and shakers within the music industry.
Well, Gareth's in my documentary, actually. In Extreme Danger, Extreme Hypnosis, Gareth appears as a section in there about the music industry and the media. And he relates his experience of ending up in an office with the late Max Clifford, the British publicist who we spoke about.
Speak of the devil.
And also with a record producer. And ultimately, Gareth was offered the several album deal, the massive amounts of money, the A-list celebrity style fame, that was all going to be engineered. And he talks about how Max Clifford said, look, because Gareth was in a relationship, Max was saying to him, look, is your wife or the lady friend going to be okay seeing you in the paper? One morning we're coming out of a restaurant with supermodel whoever or TV presenter whoever, with the intimation that there's some kind of relationship going on, because that's what Max would do. get people to go out for dinner together. They were both his clients, and then just tell them on the way out, give each other a hug, and from the right angle when we take a picture, it'll look as though you know, a picture tells 1,000 lies when it's got certain words with it in the gutter press, and they would use that as publicity. And he explains all this, and then he was pretty much, to a degree, kind of going to go with it, and he would have got the recognition to the level that his talent deserves, because he's an amazing musician. I've seen him perform live, absolutely wonderful musician. It's like what we said before about, you know, there's a lot of famous people who aren't particularly talented, and a lot of incredibly talented people who aren't particularly famous. And with Gareth, they turned round and said, but there's just one thing, we need to change your name from Gareth Ike. And at first, Gareth thought this was because, by his own admission, he says some people pronounce it Icky or Ike, or, you know, and it can be a bit awkward. So he thought it was a bit like, you know, getting the two Gallagher brothers, the Manchester musicians, and rather than being called the Gallaghers, they got called Oasis, became famous all around the world. He thought it was from that angle, and it made sense. And he probably would have gone down that route, as he mentions in the film, if it wasn't for the fact that they then clarified that the reason that they wanted to do it is because they wanted him to fully disassociate with anything to do with his dad, David Icke. Arguably one of the world's leading truth researchers. And Gareth, being a man of principle and high moral value, and obviously, you know, loves his dad as well as those considerations, went, no, that's, you know, bang out of order. You know, whatever you may think of my dad, the simple fact is he is my dad, and also, more importantly, you know, even if I don't agree with 100% of what he puts out there, you know, the fact is, more and more of it's being proven to be true, factual, and correct. Consistently over decades, that's become more and more obvious to people that, you know, the one time branded by the media nutter, apparently, things he put in print in, like, you know, 1991 in a book called The Biggest Secret. If you get an original copy of that from 1991 and look at what he said would happen and the sort of timescales it would happen in, and the fact that he actually named celebrity paedophiles like Jimmy Savile, like certain members of royalty, and all these things have come to light as reality in recent years. You know, his track record of getting things so stunningly correct, he's clearly got good sources, shall we say.
Former Prime Minister Edward Heath, too, is another name, I believe.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, before it all came out and became public, it was there in print. He stood by it, and it's now proven to be right. And the thing is, it just shows, as I said, Gareth is an amazingly talented individual, but basically, because he wouldn't toe the media agenda, and the powers that be behind the scenes, you know, the money people in show business and music controlled by higher-ups, to be seen, the fact that he wouldn't disown his dad, so to speak, disconnect, disassociate, meant that that's a black mark. And, you know, it's going, I'm not saying it's going to be impossible for Gareth to get the level of recognition that his talent deserves, but because fortunately we do live now in an internet age, and people, you know, people you've never heard of can sell more, you know, downloads and get known that way. So there are possibilities now that didn't used to exist. So but if they want to block you because you're seen as the enemy, so to speak, then they will.
Indeed. I think that applies equally as well to what we find taking place out here in social media. So often the shadow banning, the way that algorithms are structured, and who's ultimately working behind the scenes to pull the strings to either see to it that certain, as you mentioned earlier, Jonathan, certain acts, certain shows, certain
Facebook is a
hosts or
massive
whoever
psyop.
are promoted. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, it's CIA was right there up
There's a
front.
lot of evidence that Mark Zuckerberg, well, no, there's definite evidence Mark Zuckerberg did not create the software or the platform that became Facebook. He quite clearly didn't. And the producer of my documentary, Extreme Danger, Extreme Hypnosis, a gentleman called Richard Alexander Willey, he runs a podcast called Glitch in the
Matrix. Oh, I'm sorry,
Glitch in the Code. And
Jonathan, I'm sorry, I cut you off there. I thought it was Glitch in the Matrix. Glitch in the what? Last word?
Glitch in the Code. CODE.
Okay, all right.
And on that, he interviewed. I've had a mental block on the guy's name, but he's interviewed. If you search YouTube, it'll come up. Glitch in the Code. Richard Alexander Willett. He interviewed the guy who did come up with the software, the platform that ultimately is what Facebook is founded on. It was not Zuckerberg.
Yeah.
Zuckerberg's just the front man.
And do you know where it ended up? I think I listened to that interview, or I know the gentleman you're speaking of, or at least one of them. It ended up that code ended up in Korea, where I am currently located. They used it for what they have here. It's known as Cow Talk. Cow Talk is their sort of Facebook that all Koreans use, and they're not so much into Facebook itself. But that was the original code that was sold to these Korean investors, and you're definitely. There's a lot to Zuckerberg. He has such a strange.
He's a front man. He just to manipulate Facebook. You know, people go. You see people sharing stuff, going, "Oh dear, they're soon going to start charging you to use Facebook." No, they never will. What they will do is take business people who were kind of getting a lot of business from Facebook and then restrict people from seeing their posts, so that those business people, their posts, their adverts, for want of a better phrase, are not getting seen by as many people, so they don't make as much money, so that they can manipulate a situation where the business people then have to start paying for Facebook advertising.
That's right.
So that their posts get seen.
Yeah.
And that's how they monetize it, and also by selling adverts and this, that, the other. They will never make it that you have to pay to join it from the end user point of view, because they want as many people, and it is the biggest social media platform in terms of members at the moment, they want as many people on there because of things like the photo recognition. These challenges, what were you like 10 years ago and now? That's not a random member of the public who started that. That is the CIA. They then have got a picture of you 10 years ago and right now for facial recognition purposes. All wonderfully catalogued online, and you've voluntarily given it them.
Have you heard of LifeLog, Jonathan, within the context of things? Are you familiar with that project? Does that ring a bell?
Vaguely, I'm assuming the basic fact that the CIA have a project that I suppose is kind of the modern day remnants of what was MK Ultra years ago, in so much as collecting as many data points as possible on every living human being, so they can use those to manipulate and control people's thoughts, feelings, emotions, and stuff.
Jonathan, where it came from, LifeLog, and it's everyone that hasn't looked into it yet, by all means, take a journey, take a ride out on, via DuckDuckGo is what we encourage you to do when engaging in these searches. LifeLog, DARPA, Pentagon, DARPA, CIA, Pentagon, LifeLog. This LifeLog project died the very day Facebook went public. This began to start selling shares, announced that it was forming as a limited, corporation, or however the deal works there exactly. So if you follow, and it's so for a lot of people, that's like just a little too much coincidence that the LifeLog project, they'd pull the plug on that the very day that fake book took to flight.
No, it's very rarely. Sometimes you get coincidences, but generally speaking, it isn't. And it's like they get some kind of strange perverse pleasure out of making certain things so blatantly obvious that they're laughing in the face.
Revelation of the method. Yeah. That's what it's often known as, for sure. Predictive programming and so forth. Revelation of the method in particular. Let's see. Okay, speaking of shout-outs and so forth and everything else, we'd like to be actually reaching our people out on, speaking of Facebook, right now, but they're blocking us. There's issues here. I don't know. This is the first time I've seen this, but we had almost as many as 10 people there over on YouTube, a couple over on DLIVE, and we've definitely, the comment sections is heating up here. Dana Shiver dropping into the conversation here just within the last few minutes. Mr. Spinks. William F. Cuckley, Joey Boomer. Who else do we got there? Reverend Jim, of course, who is simulcasting, restreaming, and some would say even syndicating, as along the lines as to what we have recently managed to secure with a few other outlets. So we'll be sharing more of that information with listeners later. Yeah, we're definitely growing in a big way here, Jonathan. It's really great to see the support from our listeners, people that have had a chance to check out what we do here. And, this is year 5. So we could stand to, benefit from all the help that people would have to offer. That's why we encourage people, of course, to drop by WPRPN.com and click on the FAQ page. So I think that's about it. Hopefully didn't miss out on anybody. Apologies if we did. This is show number 174 of Pirate Radio Podcasts, here with this week's special feature guest, Jonathan Royle, out of the UK. It's just shortly after, it's 5 a.m. now, I guess. There, yeah. Jonathan's son's probably coming up, and hopefully, it sounds like you're definitely chomping at the bit there and doing, delivering the goods as we would have hoped. But let's just back things up one more time. This bad boy image, because I'm not sure if it's something that you, what it was, that it did lead to some trouble, though. Definitely it did. How the expression goes, we're often our own worst enemies.
Well, it was more of a survival thing, really, because everything was all kind of squeaky clean, shall we say, almost, and positive in terms of the media stuff that I was generating and doing up until about 1994. And then the stage hypnosis market in England got somewhat saturated because a hypnotist called Paul McKenna had a TV series at the time. Every man and his dog suddenly wanted to become a stage hypnotist. People who were DJs in nightclubs suddenly decided they want to be stage hypnotists. They go on a course, they go out. They were, frankly, most of them quite dangerous and really didn't know what they were doing. And very rapidly, the market became saturated and, in some respects, dangerous. And coincidentally, and unfortunately, tragically, in fact, in late 1993, a lady called Sharon Taban passed away a number of hours after having attended a stage hypnosis show. Not one of mine, I may add, definitely not one of mine, but a show presented by a guy in England called Andrew Vincent. And the truth of the matter is she went home and she, as I understand it, choked on her own vomit in her sleep, something to that effect. Home Office coroner's report categorically stated that there was no connection to her being hypnotised whatsoever. But as you can imagine, it's one thing having facts, evidence and proof that it was nothing to do with hypnosis, just an unfortunate coincidence that it happened, that night after such a show. But when emotions are involved, understandably, if you've lost your daughter, you might set up, as her mother did, Margaret Harper, a thing called the Campaign Against Stage Hypnotists, or CASH for short. But anyway, Campaign Against Stage Hypnotists was set up, and by the start of 1994, the media, particularly at the time the biggest red daily newspaper in England, the Sun newspaper, another Rupert Murdoch-owned publication, by the way, and a particular journalist who's no longer alive, but called Christopher Blythe, who, as anyone who visits my blog page, circusofthemind.net, and takes the time to read all the background on the corruption I've uncovered in the media, Christopher Blythe was a very close friend with Rebecca Brooks, who, whose name I mentioned earlier, is in relation to allegations of the phone hacking, and it appears was also friends indirectly with the fake sheikh Mazen Mahmood. Small world. Well, this guy, Christopher Blythe, back in 1994, came and saw me doing a comedy hypnosis show. And one of the routines I did during that was I hypnotised a woman. There were men on stage hypnotised as well. It's just for this particular routine. Unless it was a gay venue, then I might have used a man to make it funny. But a bit of sleep. When you wake up in a few months' time, the more the hypnotist ignores you, the more you will positively, madly, passionately and deeply fall in love with the hypnotist. You want to get his attention. You want to prove to him you're 100% woman. And it would play out that I'd be ignoring the person and they'd be tapping me on the shoulder, following me around the stage, trying to get me attention. And the more I ignored them, the more that was generating the laughs. And then at some point, I would actually listen to them briefly and off microphone, whisper in their ear, okay, you can do what you want type thing. Bearing in mind that they've already been conditioned to this idea that they're in love with the hypnotist. So invariably, they would end up kissing me, and I turn my mouth slightly away so it looks as though you're being kissed, but it means I can speak. But from an audience angle, it looked as though that was happening, and I would cue them, as it were, give them a command to move their head down my body. And that's the instruction they've been given. Their head would move down my chest, and then I would then suddenly go asleep, and it would look as though I was stopping them a split second before they were about to try to perhaps perform oral sex on stage. That is the way it could be perceived, but nothing actually happened. It was stopped. It's the implication of something could have happened and me stopping it where it becomes funny. And that's how it would look if you were sat in the audience, which is all well and good, like various other routines I do. If you were sat there in the audience, you'd see that people were fully clothed. Yes, they may be miming the actions of masturbating the person next to them, but they weren't really holding on to the person's sexual organs. It was mime, a visual mime. But Christopher Blythe took these routines that actually look relatively innocent when you see them perform live, they just have a bit of smutty adult humour to them, and wrote them up in a manner that people reading the newspaper would read it and it sounds as though it actually took place. So it sounds as though to the reader that people were genuinely engaged in sexual activity or so. A
lot worse, obviously, than what it actually was, is what you're trying to convey here.
Yeah.
So,
there'd be some people who, on the back of that, did come and see the show and go, "What was all the fuss about? That this isn't what was wrote up in the paper." But for the mass populace, it caused outrage, and suddenly because this campaign against stage hypnotists was getting a lot of traction at the time, I was suddenly held up by other stage hypnotists who were jealous of the fact that I was only, at the time, 17 years of age, and I was getting lots of national media publicity. I was held up as the hypnotist to hate, because by pointing the finger at me, they were kind of hoping it would deflect attention from themselves, make themselves look like they're the squeaky clean ones, but also they were hoping deep down, I'm damn certain, that it would put me out of business, one less competitor, so to speak. Unfortunately for them, little did they know how much I knew about the media and how things work behind the scenes. And unfortunately for me, I was in a position then that either I wasn't going to get booked, because, you know, you wouldn't be booking me for your Vicar's Tea Party based on what Christopher Blythe had wrote and fabricated in the Sun newspaper. So I had no choice in order to kind of stay in business but to take that bad boy of hypnosis label that article kind of branded me with and run with it, and publicise myself in that manner and change it to poster saying, the show they tried to ban, stay away if easily offended. And in truth, I wasn't doing, for the vast majority of it, 98% of the show was the exact same show that I was doing previously, that I could have done in front of a family audience, because the nature of the routines visually would be such that adults, double entendres, like Carry On films, you know, the adults would perceive it as a mucky joke, but it would go over the heads of kids.
Right,
It's
sure.
just
A lot
about
of
context and presentation.
Innuendo, yeah. Sure. Mm-hmm.
So I had no choice but to kind of jump on board. So then I ended up paying an actress to, because I knew that the media, their interest in whether something's true or not is next to nil. They just want to sell papers, which is why there's a saying in the media industry: if it bleeds, it leads.
That's right.
If it bleeds, it leads. In other words, the more horrible the atrocity, the more likely it is to be on the front page, because the media is about instilling a sense of fear, disorientation and confusion into the mass populace. So yeah, ultimately I was engineered into it. I didn't have a choice. I wanted to stay in business. So rather than go out of business, I ran with it, embraced it, and paid a glamour model to tell the newspaper she'd had the most amazing sex of her life after being consensually hypnotized. That's the key, consensually, with consent. Now, you may be ahead of me here and guess that when the newspapers wrote up this story of how she'd, you know, been hypnotized to think I was Mel Gibson, the film star she idolised and then had the best night of her life, when they wrote it up, they didn't directly say she'd been hypnotised against her will, but they intimated that, because that made for a more scandalous story, didn't it?
There was a video actually that I guess you you shared with I don't know who, the media perhaps, almost.
Yeah, at one time I did share the video.
This is the same woman.
Model who was paid. This was a different one.
Mm-hmm.
There's been about half a dozen glamour models over the years who all signed.
And all consensual. Right. You have to have that, and then from there everything is. There's no ethical breach. There's the 1952 piece of legislation, which I like you to share, just kind of.
Can I just be clear?
Flesh out.
Can I just be clear here?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
I was making it quite clear that anything was consensual in terms of what the newspapers were told, because I wanted them to print that, and often they didn't. They tried to steer it to look more dodgy than it actually was. The real truth of the matter is that I didn't have sex with any of those women. Not a single one of them.
It was all fake.
They were just paid glamour models.
And okay, so with the video that I saw on, I think there was just a clip.
There was no actual real sex took place in that video.
It was all staged.
Yeah. I have signed consent forms on file. It was staged, as simple as that, and yeah, the media come to the video clips of it can be seen on magicalguru.com on the television television page on there.
Sure.
The video's on there.
What was
they're just paid glamour models.
That's brilliant. What was this deal then that I just heard in passing briefly? It kind of did jump out at me. It struck me as something that was quite, central to what we are talking about here. This 1952 legislation dealing with hypnosis, maybe ethics or something along those lines. Can you just kind of fill us in on what that entails?
In England, some countries have similar laws, but mainly it's England. And long story cut short, it's a whole bunch of nonsense that's in place, certain guidelines that stage hypnotists in particular have to follow when they're doing a show in England. Now, I say they have to, they don't, because there's massive glaring loopholes in the law. Well, generally, it's to protect the general public, and it goes back to the late 40s when an American hypnotist called Ralph Slater was over in England doing some shows, and after one of his shows, a woman claimed that she'd become incredibly depressed and felt really bad. And as a consequence, some people were calling for stage hypnosis shows to be banned then, but a British stage hypnotist who was massive during the war and after the war, called Peter Casson, who's no longer alive, he set up a thing called the Federation of Ethical Stage Hypnotists, and he lobbied for, rather than banning stage hypnosis, let's have a set of rules and guidelines that people have to abide by. But it's a nonsense law. There's no need for it really, because there are such things as duty of care laws, health and safety laws, criminal and civil laws out there that, as long as they are being followed, then the psychological and physical safety of any volunteer in a hypnosis show will be looked after. And if they're not looked after in the right manner, then there are far bigger consequences that can be dealt through the law on the person for not following those health and safety, duty of care laws or other laws than there is for breaking the 1952 Hypnotism Act. So it's all a bit farcical, really.
We've got maybe another 25 minutes or so approximately. We run each of these Friday night feature shows for 90 minutes. And just to let listeners know, we are speaking once again this week, episode number 174 of Pirate Radio Podcast to renowned. Some have called him the king of hypnotists, or at least that's what we saw in one of your promo pics. I'm not sure who came up with that title, if there's a competition necessarily, or how those awards are handed out. But
there's no such thing. Let's be honest about
exactly.
it. There's no such thing.
Who the hell hands these things out, anyways? Yeah.
It's nonsense. Yeah. Everyone advertises the world's greatest hypnotist. Complete and utter nonsense.
Okay.
The truth is, I have been given certain awards over the years.
Sure. Penguin Magic. Look what's going on. What's the latest with Penguin Magic? You picked up something really big there recently, didn't you?
Well, what you saw on Facebook, that was just, I was just chuffed the day that they actually on penguinmagic.com put a dedicated section. So if you go on penguinmagic.com and type in Jonathan Royle, I've actually got my own section on their website, and you've arrived when they do the Penguin Magic cartoon caricature of you that stands at the top of the page. And a couple of years ago, suddenly I got alerted that I'd suddenly got my own section on the site and the cartoon there. So in the sort of magic world, that was something of a little accolade, yeah.
Okay, how cool is that? So listen, there's two places I'd like to take the conversation as we get. Mm-hmm. We're going to get to the shake in just a second here, but more detail. But Paul Zenon, I believe is his name.
Paul Zenon.
Paul Zenon, yeah, very high profile. Mentalist, somebody who, as with yourself, spent a lot of time in Blackpool, and I think a little bit of the circus life, and he's a very capable, some would say huckster. This whole business of flim flam, or the reading of tarot cards and so forth. And I think performers such as yourself do make it very clear right from the get go that everything is done for usually entertainment purposes.
It's honest dishonesty.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And James Randi, the honest liar, and everyone else out there that practices magic, I suppose, at all various levels and degrees. But now, so Paul Zenon, and there was some. The Magic Circle, in fact, I think there was a picture that you took that you had up on Facebook, and there was some beef. What was the deal there exactly between you and Paul?
Yeah, I mean, the full story on that, if you type in Jonathan Royle, the Magic Circle, you get a website. It's independent of me. I think it's called The Jerk, JERX, or something like that. Yep. Jerk.com. That's right. And they've got all the back history on there. But ultimately, I was booked to perform a lecture at the Magic Circle in England, Britain's oldest magical society for magicians. By magicians, I mean conjurers, because there are older magical societies, MAGICK, which link in with the long-term history of secret societies, the Freemasons and the so-called Illuminati, the powers that be. Well, this is the conjuring light-hearted side, and I was booked to do a lecture teaching techniques of tricks that I've devised and stuff, and all was going well until a few weeks before the event, when it'd already been advertised, but a few weeks before the event, the organisers started advertising it a bit more and stuck it in I believe, the Magic Circle magazine and whatnot. And suddenly, Paul Zenon becomes incredibly vocal, going, "Why are you booking him? Why would you book him? He's hypnotized women into having sex," and all the nonsense press story articles he held up as being evidence of why the Magic Circle shouldn't book me. Now, that's quite ironic, because part of my lecture was also going to be on how to manipulate the media and get publicity for your acts and talents, and people in show business who especially people such as Paul, who in the past has flirted with the media for his own gain, know full well that 99% of what is in the media is bullshit. So for him to come out with the nonsense that he did was quite clearly vindictive, and I don't know why. What his beef of jealousy is. He alleges that I stole, an idea of his, a routine, and I've openly admitted that I did this cut and restored microphone cable trick at one show with the British comedian Jimmy Cricket once, when I needed to fill out a bit more time. And I happened to mention that in a conversation once that Paul Zenon became privy to, and he said, "Well, I did that on TV, you've stolen my routine." And I apologised at the time, because I assumed that I must have stolen it off him, and then, bizarrely, several months later, my attention was drawn to a video of a British magician called David Nixon, who was on television before myself or Paul were old enough to be performing magic. And he was doing the exact same routine in exactly the same way, and I realised that it wasn't Paul's original idea. And ironically, also this year at Blackpool Magic Convention that I was at in February, there was a guy called Gaten Bloom, an amazing performer from Europe, and he did a whole routine with a cut and restored microphone cable, and the microphone stops working when you cut the cable, and then the audience can hear you again when it restores. So I looked into that a bit more, and lo and behold, his routine also predates Paul Zenon massively. So, God knows what his gripe was. After that, he made out publicly on some places that I'd stolen the name Life in the Bus Lane, which is the name of my European surreal, bizarre comedy TV series where I do magic, mind reading, comedy. It's all done in character. There's a storyline to it. There's a page on my website, magicalguru.com, that says Royle's TV series, where the videos are that people can watch.
Life in the Bus Lane, is that? Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, listen, I quick question here for you. I think this is a good one. Penn and Teller's bullshit. Now, just hopefully, because I've said that, we're hopefully not going to find our revenue immediately Well, YouTube has they do some strange things. Anytime you utter words that are considered to be profane, but we'll leave aside George Carlin's 7 words you can't see on TV for now. But Penn and Teller's bullshit. Did you one of the areas and topics that they never explored or went into was hypnotism, and for me,
they did actually.
Oh, they did. They did. So, okay. So, what was their conclusion? What did they decide?
Well, the way the program was geared, because clearly the nature of the series is that it's biased. Was that it is as per the title of the program. Nonsense.
Right. Here's the thing. Okay, let me just jump in because I think I got it now. So, Jonathan, here, that Penn actually later regretted doing that, I think is what he said, correct?
Some of them, because there is that manipulation from the TV companies and researchers that steer it. And quite innocently, as a presenter, you can end up getting presented with stuff and misled and told that, it's been fully researched and the weight of evidence is one direction, where in truth, there's just as much evidence out there that something has value as the opposite that says it doesn't. And rather than paint a balanced opinion, which doesn't make for as exciting television, often there is a set agenda by program makers, and things are steered that way to look a certain way. I mean, the truth is that hypnosis, almost in the context of what they're saying, is arguably bullshit. But that's only because people don't fully understand what hypnosis truly is. And the trouble with saying that it's nonsense, and I quite often do, say there's no such thing as hypnosis, it's purely suggestion. But that's because the power of suggestion is far more dangerous and positively beneficial. Used in the right way, positive suggestions can help people overcome their addictions, fears, phobias. It can make them feel more positive in life, stop them committing suicide. Make them have a sense of self-worth and value in life. Use negatively, suggestion, which is constructed of words, obviously, quite often, but there can be non-verbal suggestions as well, can make people feel down, negative, worthless, can instill fear and confusion and disorientation in them. And that's happening right now. I want to give you one major, if somewhat controversial example. The coronavirus that's sweeping the world right now, or we're told is sweeping the world. There's more than enough evidence out there that it is no worse than the common flu virus. And that in actual fact, the figures are such that far less people, proportionally, per capita of the population in each country, far less people have become affected by it, far less people have died. It just... more people have died of the common flu in the same time period. But that isn't getting the headlines in the media.
Far more from what I understand. But continue, please.
They've got an agenda. So by creating mass hysteria, two things are happening. Number one, it instills fear into people, false evidence appearing real or false evidence against reality, and it scares people. And it puts them in this state of disorientation and confusion. What's going on? Will I get it? Will a friend of mine get it? And while people are in that disconfobulated, confused state of fear, the freeze section of fight, flight or freeze, they're in that freeze. That's arguably like being hypnotized in a zombie state. And it means that they become blind to what's really going on, the bigger picture of what's going on behind the scenes. It's easier for the powers that be to get away with stuff. And here's an interesting thing. If people research Agenda 21 and Agenda 2030, these are both basically conspiracy theories, but there's lots of evidence of the likes of Bill Gates being involved with his foundations and loads of other high-profile people. It's the concept of having to rid the world of millions of people by 2030.
Conspiracy facts, I'm afraid. I would take the position, but go ahead.
Yeah, well, if people independently research it, I'm not going to tell people what they have to believe. That goes against everything I stand for. It's about people looking and researching for themselves.
That's right.
But the fact is, that is why we've had the whole Greta Thunberg psychological operations, PSYOP. It's to get the general populace, the evidence is out there that what she's speaking about, this climate change, is actual complete nonsense in the context of what she's talked about.
Oh, sure.
There is a climate issue, yes, there is, but not for the reasons that she spoke about. And the people that have come out very publicly and questioned the narrative that the media are jumping on, the media is now turned on them. In Britain, for example, there was a very famous horticulturalist, I think that's the correct word, horticulturalist, gardener, nature type guy, called David Bellamy. People can search him on the internet. He was very, very big on television until, and this is many years ago now, until people in government started talking a bit about global warming and the threat and all this, and he very vocally came out at the time saying that they were talking nonsense. And suddenly his media career was thwarted. Because if you go against the agenda of those that you're working for in the media, then they turn on you.
David Bellamy. Yeah, the name definitely rings a bell. What we're going to do here in real live time, as a matter of fact, is share with you one of the groups that we are helping to moderate, really, over on minds.com. It's the Agenda 2030 group, which there's links to Conspiracy Cafe. What else? The War on Humanity. That's another great group. David is actually over there. He doesn't really do too much. I haven't seen too much activity from him lately, but he drops in from time to time.
I've got to tell you this. It just ends up on that little bit I was saying. That so yeah, at the moment the coronavirus is the tool for the media hysteria.
Sure.
But one of the ridiculously bizarre things about it is that if it was a genuine threat in the context and to the degree that they're making it out to be, the actual worst thing they could do is to publicise it in the way that they have been doing. Because here's the thing. When human beings are in a state of fight, flight or freeze, when that's compounded with fear and disorientation and confusion, which is what these media hype's all about, that state of anxiety actually affects your body's immune system and makes it lower, which means you're more likely to be prone to get the thing.
Sure. They're talking now as well, too. It's fascinating, this business. Well, I haven't heard too many people mention this precisely, but full spectrum dominance. I don't know if you're familiar with the term. We just use hashtag FSD. With War on Humanity, hey, WOH. It's real simple, folks. So, but with this Wi-Fi, 5G, prison planet, Matrix.
Oh God, 5G. I mean, that is definitely part of Agenda 2030.
Well, sure. And there was a big ruling recently in the UK, was there not? Were you aware of it? Did you follow that news?
Yeah, there were certain council districts that ruled that they're not rolling out 5G in that area. Unfortunately, there's other areas that are rolling it out. But yeah, I mean, it's not just some wonderful faster version of 4G. It's completely different technology, millimeter wave technology that's been used in the past on the battlefields by the military to make the skin of the enemy burn. Now, when they say that, these experts are saying 5G is safe, what they're truly saying is that it's going to be used at a level that isn't going to burn people's skin. They know, most of them, that it's dangerous. Because it's just a completely different technology, and it's one that in years to come, the places it's rolled out, we will see more and more things that get termed as cancers and other illnesses occurring, because that's the plan. It's part of the plan to kill people off, and they don't care. And yes, it is as blatant as that. because otherwise, as Dr. Robin Kelly, who's a British-born medical GP but now lives in New Zealand, he also appears in my documentary, Extreme Danger, Extreme Hypnosis, and he's investigated from the perspective of a medical practitioner 5G and millimetre wave technology, and has concluded that it is highly dangerous to public health. That's the short version. For the longer version, go to magicalguru.com, click on Extreme Danger, Extreme Hypnosis, and check out the documentary. But a short version is it's extremely dangerous, and that's coming from a trained, respected medical doctor who's also done research into the technology.
Yeah, we have definitely... there are people are some people we have on board here, as a matter of fact, Pirate Joe Eminon, who has a background in this area, and I'm not going to bring him into the conversation right now. He is readily available, I do believe, but he is someone who does not take the position that it causes any problems whatsoever. What he feels more is that it's the cell phones you have to watch out for. That is the problem, and he's very well versed. He's worked at the highest levels with respect to electronics, and his
cell phones currently are not good for you, but the moment they're connected to 5G technology, it becomes even worse.
Well, that's my suspicion, and what a lot of other people are concerned about. But good old Joe and a lot of the people that are. And I think his heart's in the right place. He's just trying to take what he feels is a purely, based on the best scientific methods possible, his assessment.
Well, the trouble with science is
scientism.
It can't properly be used in certain contexts, because unfortunately science is held up as being something that the general public should believe.
It's new religion.
Unfortunately, who tells the scientists what's right or what's wrong? What is the accepted standard for their testing or rulings and stuff? And what that comes from is what they've been taught at degree level via the educational system. And who decides what is and isn't taught through the educational system? The governments. And the fact is, education is indoctrination. It's about learning to remember this information, repeat it on demand in an exam, and then you get rewarded for repeating it correctly. Right. What you're learning to do is obey the master. And if the master says this is what scientific method you've got to use, or this is the conclusion, or they guide you into the idea, this is the conclusion you should come to, then confirmation bias can massively jump in. But if you're against the mainstream, you still kind of constrained that you've got to be seen to be acceptable, do it within what is considered the scientific framework, which unfortunately is set down. What is considered to be the acceptable scientific framework is set down by the powers that be. The powers that be that will tell you, and have done for years, that the likes of I've just had a complete Nikola Tesla, the likes of the inventor Nikola Tesla, that most of his inventions were complete and utter claptrap. And yet we have now Tesla cars where the founder of it says that it's based largely on an original Tesla idea. We've had TV shows that been on in the past few years where they've tested out certain experiments of Teslas to see if they were possible, and lo and behold, they are. Things get covered up when it's not in the interests of, the powers that be.
Sure.
And when it comes to 5G, I can tell you that I run my own podcast, but it is based just on the world of hypnosis and stuff. Hence, the website's hypnosisweek.com. And in one of those episodes, I interviewed a gentleman called Keith Anthony Taylor. He's also known as the Hypno Sensei here in England. And he was talking about his experiences of being a victim of MK Ultra and the Tavistock Institute and one of the Tavistock hospitals in England, being a victim of it. And he talks about how he was targeted, believes he was targeted because he'd worked in electronics and that kind of area for top secret projects. Although they're not that top secret anymore, he talks about them in the interview. I suppose he figures he's got nothing to lose, but he was under the Official Secrets Act. And, you know, he goes on about the fact that the stuff that's being bandied around as 5G technology now, it's existed for ages, and it's been used for nefarious, well, no, you could argue.
Voice-to-skull recognition. Sure, voice-to-skull recognition.
Well.
That. When was that patented? Like back in the 50s or something? 60s. It's been a while. So, and to think that they're not using these these relay stations or whatever these creepy things are that are being set up everywhere. We have no Wi-Fi on board the ship here. Actually, we try to run a clean an operation as possible as far as our living space, or what the Germans might refer to as Lebensraum, is concerned. But hey, speaking of which, the Robin Hood and so forth, we kind of forgot all about this business of in gaining admission onto the ship. What we typically look for and request of our guests is a little pirate story of some kind, or just a pop culture reference, or maybe some historical anecdote. I'm sure growing up in the UK, you've come across more than your fair share of pirate stories.
Okay, okay. This
nothing major.
This might be seen as slightly loose, but it is on topic, and it is pirate related.
Okay.
And I'll point out why in a minute.
Let her fire.
You see, we've touched on the fact that a little over, best part 22 years ago now, in 1998, I tried to expose Mazza Mahmood, the fake sheikh of the now defunct News of the World newspaper. And the fast forwarding in time, May last year, I submitted renewed grounds of appeal to the Royal Courts of Justice in London to get my conviction overturned, because my attempt to expose him landed me with a short prison sentence. All that's fully explained, as I say, on circusofthemind.net. Now, it is I wasn't the only victim. There was numerous people that were stitched up, lied about, manipulated, intimidated and stuff. People like John Alford, the actor of a programme called London's Burning in Grange Hill in England, heavyweight boxer Herbie Hides, cricket agent Mazza Majid, former Page 3 girl and now actress Emma Morgan, the Earl of Hardwick, tons of people, and all of those that I kind of just mentioned, but a lot of them are on the photos with me on circusofthemind.net, because we've kind of been fighting the same fight for truth. And I've put it out there because a lot of them have appealed their convictions, the ones who have them, and unfortunately at the time they got them turned down. So before they can launch an appeal again and get the justice they deserve, in light that the fake sheikh's now been exposed as a serial liar, the evidence has come out of his criminal connections and activities for years on end, and a whole bunch of other things, they need new evidence to come up, or something to be stated in a court case that would give them leverage to get back to court. And many of them, their lives were ruined. They can't afford to do anything either. So in a kind of, and here's the teeniest pirate link, in a kind of Robin Hood manner, steal from the rich to help the poor, I have made it quite clear, and I'm publicly stating it again, that once, however long it takes me to do, because I'm the one who hasn't been to the Court of Appeal yet, so I'm the only one currently with that option. Once my conviction is overturned, whether it's through this direct appeal process or whatever else it takes, once that's occurred, I have a lawyer on standby who is going to sue the arse off Rupert Murdoch. And I have already made it quite clear in previous stuff on the internet, but I'll reiterate it again, that it's not about money. Hence, any money I get off Murdoch, I am going to ensure that I help in a large way, any way I can, fake shake victims such as the people I've just mentioned to get the justice they deserve. So by not robbing, but by getting the riches from the rich guy who's ruined people's lives, lied, manipulated and broken the law on numerous occasions, and then giving it to the people whose lives have been ruined in some manner to help them get the justice they deserve as well. So kind of modern day Robin Hood.
That's great that you have that in mind, basically, and you're hoping to bring that about, see that ultimately manifest. So here on this end, what we do actually each and every Christmas is something known as Operation Secret Santa. And it's our little kind of campaign that we put together. And it is a worldwide grassroots campaign that continues to grow each and every year. So maybe that's something where we could reconnect this coming December. It should be a lot of fun. December. It's a 10-day campaign, as a matter of fact, but we need to talk about it. Last year was our 5th year, and we finally realized, we need to discuss this throughout, the rest of the 11 months here that we have on hand, not just try to jump into things, right before Christmas. On the 15th usually is when we kick things off. So no, that's wonderful. So we'll definitely, you'll want to keep us posted on that. Your podcast. Yeah, I had no idea you do a podcast. So this is something that, because NLP is something, and hypnotism, mentalism, and so forth, along with all other various branches of magic and conjuring, very fascinating and intriguing to myself, and I'm sure many of the listeners. So I one more time, because I have not heard of it until just a few minutes ago. What was the name of the podcast again?
Well, I actually only started it in January this year, to be honest. But it's now one episode a week gets released, generally on a Sunday, at hypnosisweek.com. However, since January, when I launched it, the second week of January, I've released 44 episodes, interviews with 44 different people from the field of mind control, hypnotherapy, NLP and stuff.
You've been a busy guy.
Yeah, I've been rather lucky that some really big names in the world of hypnotherapy, stage hypnosis, NLP, body language, some of the big names I've known, I don't, on the one hand, I promote myself in a certain way, obviously, to make money, but I don't really think of myself as a celebrity, but then other people remind me that I am in the hypnosis world, pretty well known, and that came in rather useful when it came to wanting to get high-profile guests from the industry onto a podcast.
Have you had a chance to tie much of your extreme danger, extreme hypnosis project into what you've been recording over the course of the 44 shows? A
little bit, only where it's relevant. As I say, I've had a guest on called Keith Anthony Taylor, who has first-hand experience of being a victim of the Tavistock Institute and Tavistock Hospitals, linked in with MK Ultra. I've had one of the world's leading body language, two of the world's leading body language and non-verbal communication experts, actually. An American gentleman, Kevin Hogan, master of persuasion, and British gentleman, Robert Phipps, who's done TV shows galore around the world. Amongst that, we've spoken about how body language and non-verbal communication can be used negatively by those that want to manipulate people, as well as positively to help people. My kind of angle is to cut out the BS and also show that despite what the majority of hypnotherapists out there will tell you, and that's mainly because they believe it because what they've been told by the person who taught them originally. That's why you'll hear this nonsense of you can't be made to say or do anything that would totally contradict your morals or your values. Rubbish. Governments, arguably hypnotise the mass populace on a daily basis through the media to do things. The trick is to make people think that it fits with their morals and values, or to manipulate and persuade them to change their morals and values to something that makes it then possible and acceptable for them to do the things you wanted them to do in the first place.
Look at what Darren Brown did with the Manchurian Candidate, the episode where he had... Why is his name escaping me now? He's everywhere.
Stephen Fry.
Stephen Fry, exactly. Yeah. So that was just mind-blowing, frankly, and it just went to show that absolutely, in support of what you're saying here, that this can be quite easily done. Just make no mistake about it, folks. So be on guard. And do what you can to...
It definitely can be done. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say to you that, the reason I was kind of targeted in a certain way by certain people in the media to try and screw things up and silence me is just because of them becoming aware that I was trying to make the public aware of their nefarious techniques, or that it was just because, I was aware that they had stuff that they were suppressing and covering up, like we spoke about before. But let me just tell you, in the early 90s, I was doing a residency in High Wycombe near London in England, in a nightclub doing shows every night of the week. And one day part of the deal was that I got free taxis and whatnot. And I flagged one of these taxis down, told it where to take me, and it didn't. And I ended up in the back room of a place. And all I'm going to say is that I was categorically propositioned to use hypnotic-style techniques to ultimately help somebody rob a bank. And that I ultimately declined. In fact, I blatantly lied at the time. I said that, as far as I was concerned, that would be completely impossible, so that I could get out of there. The truth of the matter is, anything's possible if you go about it in the right manner for long enough. You can't just walk up to somebody and suddenly go, sleep, when you wake up you're going to walk into that bank and rob it, or sleep, when you wake up you're going to go and kill that person. No, you can't. Of course you can, despite how some films might make it out to be. But you can use hypnotic techniques, brainwashing, social engineering and conditioning, lifetime actors sometimes. Sometimes if they want somebody to do something, it does exist that people will come into somebody's life, befriend them, live in the same area, go and work at the same place maybe as that person. In actual fact, the reality is they're an actor paid by someone with an agenda to get into that person's life so that they can socially engineer them into a state of mind where they will do something and be the fall guy for something,
Sure. And I'd imagine one would find these sort of activities taking place anywhere, pretty much. But cities, London, and beyond, of course, New York, Paris, you name it, definitely just something that people have to stay, be made aware of, and be careful that they don't take the bait. So William F. Cuckley asking if he's being hypnotized right now, and then he's very susceptible.
Is it? Well, if you are, 1, 2, 3, wakey, wakey, rise and shine. The truth of the matter is, on one level, yeah, of course, if you're actually listening to this right now, the chances are, as you listen, you weren't, until I say it right now, aware of your breathing. But suddenly you realise that you can become aware of your level of breathing. Is it slower, more calm and relaxed than it was before? But then there's that confusion. Is it slower or is it faster? I don't know, because obviously you were listening to this and not paying attention to your breathing before that now you're thinking about. So yeah, I mean, anything where you fixate your attention on one thing, starts to close down what they call the critical faculty, analytical area of the brain. And that is why, headlines on newspapers are, if it bleeds, it leads. Fear, shock. The same, well, that's why you get more and more extreme violence in certain television things. It's to distract, it takes up the conscious mind with fear. And in that fight, flight, freeze mode, the freeze part, panic, anxiety, then the narrative, the underlying subliminal message they want to get across, which might just be as simple as instilling fear into people, gets in there and affects people at a deep, unconscious, subconscious, call it what you will, level. So they keep society frozen almost, like zombies.
Indeed, yes. So government, once again, folks, the word, as we've talked about here numerous times in the past, does simply mean mind control if you break it down, gouvernemente. And the question is, who's really calling the shots here? Is it some external third-party entity, or is it more a question of what we draw upon, what we're responsible for, decisions that we make in pursuing a more autonomous path, sense of self-naming, rather than leaving that in the hands of others? We've kind of a little bit overshot the mark here. Great conversation. Amazing the way time has flown here. I think definitely people out in the, the wider listening world here, live as we speak now on this, it's March 7th here in South Korea, nearly 3 p.m. 3 p.m. in the afternoon. I think that would make it about 6 a.m. in London. So yeah, Jonathan Royle really going that extra mile for us here, and hopefully feeding off of the live energy as well too. I don't know if you've had a chance to follow the comments on YouTube or not, Jonathan, but
no, not on YouTube. Okay. I will have a look at that when I've had a few hours sleep and comment back on things that I can. Yeah.
The last question for you then is quite simply, just so we could steer the conversation and bring it home with this business of the false sheik. I'd really like to just get into that for, just maybe 10 minutes or so, maybe 5. It's really up to you. And we'll pretty much just be able to call it a night. But this is really something. I just learned about all of this in the last day, really. It's just, so my mind really is quite blown as far as getting a clearer sense of your story and what you've had to endure. It'd be a lot to handle.
It would take ages to go into the complexities, but it is all laid out with videos, and more importantly with cast iron, easily checkable evidence. Because I do encourage people not to take anything at face value. Don't take anything at face value from anybody. Independently research from various sources. Come to your own conclusions. I can assure you when you do that in relation to the fake Sheikh Mazza Mahmood, the British journalist, Rupert Murdoch, former employee, you will come to the same conclusion as is on circusofthemind.net, but prove that to yourself. Imagine, though, if I was to say to you that one of the biggest, at the time, the biggest read newspaper in England, and this isn't just England, this happens in, okay? This happened with other people. There's other fake sheikhs with different names around the world, some male, some female. But let's just take this guy. If I was to say to you that the biggest read newspaper were going to employ somebody who had masses of criminal connections, provably, and that they would turn a blind eye, or some would argue actually encourage the individual to make use of his criminal connections and his wonderful ability to lie and manipulate people, and that they would go to the extent of butting actors into celebrities' lives to befriend them and get to know them, to then manipulate them into doing things where they feel they might just, on a low level, they feel they might be doing a favour for a trusted friend, but who's been put there on purpose to entrap them and cajole them and create a situation where a relatively innocent thing like, the majority of people listening, I guess, would never dream of going and buying drugs illegally to supply them to somebody else. If, Law, you had a relative, let's say, or a very close friend who was in severe pain from, a long-term illness, and they wanted to acquire, I know this isn't such a big deal in America, for example, because there are hash cannabis clinics and you can buy it legally and stuff, but in England you can't. So, if you had a relative and you thought you could help them, and they made you aware of someone that they knew, but they weren't healthy enough to go and pick it up, and they gave you the money to go and pick up the bag of cannabis to bring to them so they could use it for medicinal pain control purposes, you may possibly, in that circumstance, do it, if that's what you genuinely believe you were doing. Now, if that it wouldn't happen likely with a family member, although from what I've heard, it has gone to that extreme sometimes. But if that friend then turned out that they'd actually been in your life for several years with one purpose, to get to a situation where they could manipulate you to do something like that, where the reality is what you did was with innocent intent, but then they will have you secretly filmed picking up that, cannabis. So there's video of you picking up cannabis and then delivering it somewhere else. Suddenly, when the newspaper writes that up, you are someone who trades in drugs. And yet that is the first and only time you've ever laid your hands on anything considered to be a drug, and the context of it was purely innocent in intent.
Yeah, you're being framed and set up. They did it to, I don't know how many people this fake sheikh was responsible for essentially...
Hundreds framing like this and fabricating. And
he's only spent a year in jail, has he? Or what's going on?
He got given 18 months imprisonment for conspiracy to pervert the course of justice.
What a farce.
But obviously he only spent a matter of a few months actually inside.
You were sent to Strangeways back in the day, were you not? And was this not for a related... This is related to the...
Yeah, ultimately, because I, for a brief period of time, collected from one person a bag of alleged counterfeit money. And I say alleged, I'll come to that in a minute, and I delivered it to the fake Sheikh Mazza Mahmood. Now, I was recording this because it was my intention to go to a rival newspaper and give them my recordings to show the bullshit that went on behind the scenes, that frankly is illegal because it's what's classed as non-state entrapment, which is illegal. Aside from the fact that behind the scenes they would intimidate people, the perceived bodyguard of the fake sheikh would actually threaten people, and in a manner where they would believe that they or their loved ones stood to get hurt if they didn't do certain things. I'm not the only person who said it, but Talisa, the British pop star, Talisa Kontostavlos, her case collapsed in 2014. That's what led to the fake sheikh getting sent down. She said, as have I, as have John Alford, Herbie Hides, and a whole bunch of other people, that we believe we were drugged during our meetings with Mazza Mahmood, the fake sheikh, because there's certain bits that we have hazy recollections of. The next day, although some of us had been having the odd alcoholic drink, we had totally out of proportion hangovers, and symptoms that are consistent, I now know, with GHB and similar date rape drugs that can be used to make people just more verbally and whatnot compliant. So, the rabbit hole was very deep of the illegal techniques that this guy would use to fabricate a story of sensational bullshit to sell newspapers. Unfortunately, thanks to Talisa's trial collapsing and the judge noticing inconsistencies and branding Mahmood a liar, he finally got his just desserts. so to speak, although I've heard rumours that he's working under a different name now, for newspapers and back to his old tricks. But now all the people whose lives were ruined through lies, entrapment, manipulation, distortion, and kind of and along the lines of the example I gave you earlier where things are not as they appear, have now got a chance at some point, hopefully, more so they will have a chance when finally my conviction's overturned, because my thing happened back in 1998, and an important part of that is that in court I did mention and prove that I had been recording matters and was intending to expose their techniques, and that was accepted by the judge. He made comment on it in court. It was accepted by the police, and the CPS were therefore aware of it. So although I got done for a tiny bit at the time on a technicality, which is what's being appealed at the moment, the so-called fake coins, and I say so-called fake because thanks to General Data Protection Registrar requests, within the past 18 months, I've managed to obtain documentation where the Royal Mint in England, which is where the Crown Prosecution Service said they sent the coins to be verified as fake, have confirmed that they do keep records for that time period, but that they have nothing connected to my name, the fake sheikh, or the News of the World for that time period. In other words, it would appear that they never got sent to be verified and that I was taken to court actually with no real evidence, ironically. So, yeah, hopefully once that's brought out in court, my conviction's overturned, it will bring into question this big element that the CPS knew back in 1998 through what I presented to them, that Mazza Mahmood should not be trusted. Now, I found out since they knew before 1998 and didn't disclose things to me. And the evidence of that is on circusofthemind.net. And non-disclosure is a very serious matter. The Crown Prosecution Service in England are supposed to disclose anything that could affect the validity of what a witness says in a case, whether it's for the defence or prosecution. And nothing was ever disclosed to me. And I know with other victims whose cases came after mine, nothing about my case was ever disclosed to them. And yet you'd think the fact evidence had been brought up in court of nefarious, dishonest techniques being used would be relevant to any future victims' cases. So, you know, if I can get the non-disclosure element brought up in my appeal and the conviction gets overturned, then all the other victims who were not disclosed to would have leverage, provably because of it being stated during my appeal case, to get the door opened for their cases to be re-examined.
So I would imagine then these people are supporting you fully in your corner and hoping that this does come to fruition.
Oh yeah,
obviously.
yeah, of course, yeah.
Well, I think we've pretty much run the gamut here, Jonathan. It's been really quite engaging, intriguing, in some ways enlightening, a lot of fun, of course, informative. You know, one of the comments here coming via Zylan Roberts stating that Datura is another drug used for that purpose. And interestingly enough, Jonathan Royle, no joke, I just encountered a guy at the liquor store who looked just like you, and it was such a weird interaction. So I guess you've got a doppelganger. Wait a minute, hang on. Oh, this is interesting. He looked me dead in the eyes. And he's an American too, so he's off in the States. He looked me dead in the eyes after he rang up the beer and said nothing, like he was trying to hypnotize me. Very strange synchronicity. Matrix glitch. Hashtag Matrix glitch. How about that? Isn't that something? So,
excellent.
Yeah. So, all right. Now, Circus of the Mind. Yeah, I think that's the main link.
Oh yeah.
Well, that's definitely where, once again, people, extreme danger, extreme hypnosis. I saw some of the videos, of course, and as much of the bio information, and so
There's
forth.
also a whole bunch of free stuff for listeners.
Great.
You know, if they go on my website, magicalguru.com,
Yep.
Near the top of the header, well, near the bottom underneath the header, there's a bit that says free stuff. It literally says free stuff. And there is links on that page to free PDFs teaching how to use hypnosis to overcome your own habits, addictions, fears, phobias, and stuff. There's links to free videos that will teach you techniques you can use in everyday life for positive purposes, you know. Yes, they are the same techniques that some people use negatively, but as long as you're doing it with positive intent, then that's cool. But yeah, there's a whole bunch of free stuff people can go and check out on magicalguru.com.
Oh, wow. It's, you know, I myself, once again, not a professional magician by any means. I love to dabble and have fun with the kids here, of course. That's always a blast. But you mentioned Paul Daniels earlier, of course, a huge, you know, British legend who recently, just in the last couple of years, passed away, unfortunately. Yeah. Ravine was our guy back in Canada as a kid growing up. He would tour frequently through Western Canada, British Columbia, and the like, and all the little towns along the way that he could hit. You remember Ravine, of course.
Yeah, Ravine.
Peter Ravine.
In later life, well, he obviously did an illusion show as well as a hypnosis show, but in later life he went and settled in Las Vegas and became Las Vegas headliner magician Lance Burton's manager.
That's right. Yes, that's right. So isn't that something? So how about that? An amazing profession, though, and field of study that, I mean, magic goes back so far, of course, obviously, even to the pyramids where they've got, I guess, engraving or picture hieroglyphics of the cup and ball routine, supposedly.
Yeah, it certainly looks as though that's what's going on, and it most likely is. And then it was recorded early in those days. One of the earliest tricks apparently was picking up a chicken or a chickeny type bird,
right,
and ripping its head off, and then restoring the head back on the bird.
Right. Yes. In fact, and that was one of the effects that a fellow British magician actually performed. I forget his name at the moment, but he did that. I think it was in season 1 or 2 of Alistair Cook, the magician. That's yep.
The Secret History of Magic, I think the program was called.
No, it was Fool Us. I'm sorry, with Penn and Teller.
Oh, right. Oh, well, yeah, he did do it on there, but prior to that, he did it in Egypt. There was a series on Sky, so I don't know if it's available on Netflix or whatever, and it was called something like The Secret History of Magic or The History of Magic, and Ali Cook and another guy whose name escapes me right now visited locations in the world and looked at the history of magic in those countries, and one of them was Egypt, and they found the history of the head being ripped off the bird, and that's when I first saw him do it. Good few years before he did it on Fools.
Isn't that amazing? So, what we typically do here, or, well, not quite often, it just depends on the guest, is it's a 1-hour premium, what we call Rogues Gallery after show. With you, however, I want you to go to bed. I want you to get some sleep, and because I think that's probably more important than the after show end of things, unless you insist.
How do you mean?
Pardon me?
Well, what's that entail?
The Rogues Gallery after show?
Yeah.
Oh, well, just basically we kick back, let her hair down a little, and kind of recap, revisit the main event, and the conversation pretty much leads anywhere. But if there is the main feature guest does join us, and of course we keep the focus on them. Obviously, they're the most important thing at hand.
Hey, dude. I'm happy to hang on for a bit longer.
Oh boy. Well, this is behind the scenes though too, right? So we'll end the live stream, and then we'll record. This is the the premium Patreon content that people, if they chip in to the pirate tip jar for $1 or whatever, that they can get their hands on. So, okay, well, you stand by then. Just mute yourself out, unless there's any just closing comments or just last little words.
One key message is, as I say, on magicalguru.com, there's free stuff, but there's also the stuff about extreme danger, extreme hypnosis. There's a whole bunch of free videos on there. But a collective message overall is to protect yourself from being manipulated, brainwashed, hypnotized, call it what you will, emotionally, socially engineered. Question everything. I don't mean become overly paranoid, but question everything. Just because an authority figure tells you something, don't take it as automatic read. Independently research yourself from several different sources. And if the general collective overview appears to be in line, then, and your gut feeling feels that it's right, then go with it. If independently researching it, you get a gut feeling and a general confusion of evidence or evidence totally against, then obviously be a bit more careful. People take things too easily. You know, it's called the halo effect in psychology. The idea that, you know, if somebody sees somebody in a white coat, they tend to assume that person's a medically qualified doctor. It could actually just be a person in a white coat. Remember that, question everything, and, you know, things can be a whole bunch better for you in life.
Very good. Thank you for those final comments. Jonathan, we'll just once again get you to mute yourself out and grab a coffee or sandwich or whatever you want to do. We're going to be taking a bit of a break here before we return for the after show behind the scenes here. Thanks to everyone who has joined us. I will
make a very quick coffee then, guys. Thank you, listeners, and thanks for having me on the show. And I'll be back here in 5 minutes for the after show.
There you go. Exactly. So, hey, this is great, folks. I really feel bad for Jonathan. Unfortunately, it's so, you know, he's had to get up at 4 in the morning really to be live here on air with us. But this premium content should be a lot of fun, and be sure to swing by, of course, WPRPN.com. Sign up is free. Once again, check out all the links we have available. Check out the links we have down here. I'm just looking actually at Facebook right now. Looks like Pirate Larry, hey, is in the house here. So who knows? Maybe if he's around on Skype, he'll be able to join us here in the after show. So Pirate Larry, yes, if you're listening, you're more than welcome. This may be an area of conversation that does interest you. So having said this, though, yeah, we will be back this coming Tuesday, rather, for our standard news event, of course, picking up more of the people who are simulcasting, and there's a little bit of syndication of our show taking place here from several different angles. So that's great. People are, you know, they're getting something out of what we're doing here. Obviously, ideally, it would be great. I mean, if we're good enough to put this out on a daily basis, I don't know. I don't think I'd be able to handle it here personally from a technical standpoint. But if we're able to work ourselves up to that level, I'd definitely be interested in perhaps, you know, pursuing a course such as that. But having said all this, of course, big word of thanks to Mr. Anderson, who has been laying low here down in the engine room and out on the he's running about helping to relay messages and so forth. So he'll be out there in the after show, of course. Anyone else who's listening is welcome to join us for any further follow-up or questions. But other than that, yes, you can get a copy of what we are going to be embarking upon here via Patreon. And bottom line, folks, keep in touch. Pirate1Radio@protonmail.com is the way to do it if you have a show idea or maybe even a guest in mind. PayPal donations, that's how we receive them, through that email. Minds.com as well, too. Let's not forget, token donations are always appreciated. And let's keep doing this, working on making the dream come alive. WPRPN.com, the People's Pirate Network. Until we meet again out in the high digital seas, on behalf of Captain Long John Sinclair and all the rest of the crew here aboard the Robin Hood, I'm your host, as always, the ship's Chief Communications Officer, Jaffe Ryder. Tally-ho!
I know. There we be. Having carefully looked over each of our navigation panel instruments,
checking every level, switch, dial, cable, knob, and pulley, by all accounts and indications, we indeed see it's time, once again, to drop anchor inside Mystic Bay.
Draw an end to yet another week of World Pirate Radio Live.
Remember,
if you're looking for a little more animated online action,
keep in mind we've likely got yet another great free-flowing Rogues Gallery after show
coming up for the next hour in one of our more premium exclusive and remote digital underground online pirate hideaways. Also, if you yourself have a new,
novel, intriguing, or otherwise underreported idea, unique individual, or pressing item in mind, be sure to either drop us a line directly over on WPRPN.com or fire us a quick email
via PirateOneRadio@ProtonMail.com.
We're always open to exploring fresh creative suggestions, intriguing guest ideas, cutting-edge discussion topics, and captivating themes.
Remember, WPRPN.com member site subdomain links are also always available.
Great for artists, musicians, podcasters, bloggers, social media personalities,
or pretty much just any old landlubber
looking to boost their online visibility, presence, and reach.
Basic personal profile accounts can be launched for just $60 per year.
Staking your claim now helps not only strengthen you and the network, we're also looking out for the little guy. That's right, folks. As much as half of all WPRPN's profits are redirected right back into the hands of the people who really need it most. Community charity. After all, we are the Robin Hood.
You can further embark on your own personal pirate journey by either liking, sharing,
commenting on, subscribing to, or just following us via virtually any mainstream social media platform, including Twitter, Facebook,
Gab,
or Minds.com. So don't forget to become engaged. Until we meet again out on the high digital seas, I'm your host as always, the ship's Chief Communications Officer, Jaffe Ryder. Tally-ho.